Hello, School Transportation Nation. Tony Corpin here. We're glad you made it to the podcast. It's brought to you by TransFinder, the leader in school bus routing software, by IC Bus, the next generation can change everything, and by Propane, the energy for everyone. In just a bit, we're going to be talking to D'Allah Laffoon, Transportation Supervisor at Waterloo Central School District in New York. His school district won Top Transportation Team, sponsored by TransFinder, at STN EXPO West in Reno over the summer. And it was really done amazing job by Antonio Civitella and his team at TransFinder, who put together this really great recognition for leaders in school transportation with these awards. A lot happening in school transportation too. And I've got Ryan Gray with me here. And Ryan has always got his fingers on the pulse of the industry. So welcome, Ryan.
Yeah, Tony, thank you for having me once again. Hello, nation.
Yeah. All right, cool. Well, before we dive in, quick message. Ryan, we just got a press release from IC Bus about an exclusive webinar they're hosting on October 17th and October 18th. Do you guys operate school buses in a state adopting EPA, CARB, and GHG regulations in 2025? Join the IC Bus team for a detailed webinar to learn how these regulations will impact you and your operations in the coming years. Also discover how IC Bus's new bundled solutions can support your zero emissions journey. Guys, make sure and sign up. Again, that's Thursday, October 17th, 12 p.m. Central, and Friday, October 18th, 12 p.m. Central. You can register today by going to stnonline.com/go/IC webinars. That's stnonline.com/go/IC webinars. Guys, register today for the best webinar that meets the best date and time in your schedule. They can't wait to see you there. All right, Ryan, a lot of tough news there coming out of the Southeast with the hurricane hitting hard. I know last week when we reported on it, it was just working its way through. And now we're seeing the aftermath and the impact and the halo effect of the hurricane. So break it down for us. What's happening out there?
Well, if you've been watching the news reports as we're recording this, over 200 dead. I'm reading that the death toll is just going to continue to climb. This is catastrophic. When Helene was bearing down on the Gulf Coast of Florida, we heard that talk about a 1,000-year storm coming. And certainly it was bad in Florida, but even worse as it's now moved inland. It's no longer a hurricane. But Helene has just caused incredible, unbelievable damage to so many states. North Carolina, perhaps being the hardest hit. I'm reading that half of the fatalities so far are in North Carolina alone. South Carolina has fatalities. Virginia, Georgia. There were a couple in Florida. I think we're just going to continue to see the destruction unfold before us. In terms of student transportation, obviously so many schools in the affected areas, the worst areas like Asheville, North Carolina, which probably has the majority of those deaths in North Carolina. That school district has been closed. Not sure what the next week holds, but it has been closed this past week. I was talking in neighboring South Carolina to Mike Bullman, our friend, who's the state director of transportation there at the South Carolina Department of Education, and part of our school bus inspection training program instructors. And he was still without power a week after the storm hit Florida, and it's been several days now where the rain and the wind and the flooding has affected his area. But he was upbeat about it in terms of, it could be far worse. And, he could be one of these poor people that have lost their homes or lost their lives. So definitely puts everything into perspective. Whenever we have these hurricanes or other storms, tornadoes, whatnot, one of the things we always look to is how does this impact the school bus fleet? How does this impact operations? But there's first and foremost, there's a human element to this. Folks are without water. They're, running short on food. They're stranded. We don't know how many people are still missing, unaccounted for. How many of those are dead? How many of those just need to be rescued still? It's definitely third world country type stuff that we're seeing the images out of the Southeast. But, in terms of the school transportation operations, those will, where they can get back up online, have already gotten back up online. We're still trying to get reports from the field on how this has impacted folks. Some of the states, I know we had another story that we were working with the state of Virginia, and there was a delay because they said, with the storm, their resources were tapped. I was reading over 1 million people without power still in the greater southeastern area, these multiple states. So really our hearts go out to all the folks affected. You just try to pick up the pieces the best you can, and hopefully we can get to some end goal on this thing. We're still heavily in hurricane season, Tony. Technically, it seems like hurricane season is year round now. They're coming earlier, lasting later, but traditionally through the end of October, early November is when hurricane season would end. Hopefully, I haven't even looked lately to see what the latest storms are on the front coming, but you just think that these poor folks in the Southeast U.S., they just can't take anymore. So again, our hearts go out, and where operations are up and running again, reach out to us. Email us, send me your photos, let us know how the flood and the weather has impacted you and your communities. Because again, we can't lose sight of this industry exists for the children, get them to and from school. And when that is impossible for whatever reason, Mother Nature, in this case, those kids are really negatively impacted. And it's going to be upon the entire community, the entire educational system to bring some sense of normalcy back to those kids. I know I've been reading of some of the operations that are up and running, whether school's back or not. They've turned back to the COVID-19 days of delivering food. And I think in some places I've seen internet. So where that can actually work. Because again, folks are without power. I've been, talking with speakers for the TSD conference coming up next month. And some of those folks are in that area, and they're all apologies. The Wi-Fi has been out, haven't had any internet, and now it's spotty. And these are the folks that are a little bit far away from the major flooding, but they're still being impacted. So our hearts go out to folks, and stay safe out there, and keep fighting the good fight.
Yeah, our hearts really do go out, Ryan. It's definitely, when these kind of catastrophes hit, it's always gut wrenching, and it also, we've seen a halo effect. How does that affect our industry? How does it affect the kids, the families? These are tough times in that region, and some areas they're counting their lucky stars. They missed the storm, right? Our own Merari Acevedo down in Florida said, "Oh yeah, it didn't graze us really at all," but you talk to people in the Carolinas, it's a whole other story. So
yeah, Merari, I think, was being positive there. She lived through the Puerto Rico hurricane several years ago. But we know that the storm surge just along the Florida coast was horrific. Some of the folks that we know in the industry who live in the Tampa area got some flooding. Other folks definitely lost power for a while. So it wasn't. I wouldn't say they didn't hit them at all, but I think it's not as bad as some of the other storms that they've lived through of late there in Florida. But certainly the impact of once Helene hit the mainland and then started going up into Georgia and the Carolinas, and Tennessee, Virginia. it's just been, like I said, that 1,000-year storm. So it's all perspective, right? It's where you live. Sometimes maybe you're not as hit as hard, but it's definitely just a once in a lifetime storm. And we're also hearing, Tony, the impact. I talked a lot about, obviously, on human life. You were mentioning the effect on the industry. We have some major school bus manufacturers in this area. Bluebird in Georgia, obviously, last report, we were still trying to get details from them on how this impacted them. Same thing with Thomas Built Buses in North Carolina. No, we've been hearing some things of disruptions. There's some major propane suppliers in the area as well. So definitely there is a business aspect to this storm as well. Let's not forget that. Certainly, first and foremost, it's human life. It's the necessities that we need to figure out. And I know the federal government is involved, and all the states have, of course, called natural disasters, and the National Guard has been mobilized. But we can't forget that just as this storm is going to impact the lives of those affected for months, if not years to come, we just came out of a pretty bad supply chain shortage, or at least it's definitely improved. But now here we are, potentially impacted again by this storm and the impact on manufacturing. There's a lot of vendor suppliers in that southeastern area as well that supply different technology products to school buses. I mentioned, the propane. So really, it's going to be several months, I think, before we get a better picture on the far-reaching impacts of Helene.
I know, looking at the headlines, there was another hurricane brewing, Hurricane Kirk, out in the Atlantic. So we'll see when this recording comes out how that impacts us as well. So hopefully it's not the 1-2 punch, but definitely something to keep an eye on. Ryan, I saw on the website last week, we had a story up on school bus driver shortage, but how rural Virginia county is moving the needle a little bit in the right direction, hopefully. So give us a little more on that.
Yeah, so the Virginia Department of Education for the past 3 years has been tracking the number of school bus driver vacancies, both full-time and substitute or part-time. And they have been showing an improvement over the last few years, certainly coming out of COVID-19. A lot of states and a lot of school districts were impacted negatively in terms of their school bus driver shortage, as well as just employee shortages across the board. Certainly, things have been getting a little bit better, but as we know, we're not out of the woods. And I don't know if we'll ever be out of the woods with the driver shortage. That's always something that's impacted this industry. But certainly, there are some indications that Virginia is moving the needle a little bit, so to speak. And so actually, we're looking at a couple of more rural school districts there in Virginia, and how they've basically turned to of course, wages, which is not always sustainable, as one of our sources tells us, and that proves to be a difficulty for rural school districts, county school districts in particular. But one of the school districts, Rappahannock County, we actually spoke with the superintendent, Shannon Grimsley, and she is one of those superintendents who is driving the school bus, Tony. So we've done several articles over the past several years about superintendents who get their CDL to help out with the driver shortage. So Grimsley is known as the superintendent cheerleader in chief there at Rappahannock, and so she has been driving part-time, and she's looking to really lead by example, and there's been a notable increase there in terms of just the publicity. There's several articles about her that I found. Actually, after we published our article, I found that there was several articles about Rappahannock County and what Shannon has been doing there, driving the school bus. And as I mentioned, it's really had a ripple effect throughout the community. Others have seen her leadership and seen how she stepped up to the plate, and other folks are coming to the district saying, "Hey, I want to drive a school bus too." Certainly, this I file this in the folder of culture, Tony. We've talked a lot about that, where if it's not pay wages for drivers or mechanics or anybody else in the school district, it's that culture, that family atmosphere that really resonates. It goes beyond the barbecues and whatnot, and it goes to the top teams. And we're going to be talking with D'Allah a little bit later, as you mentioned. I'll be talking with him, and that employee satisfaction. Do they want to wake up every morning and go drive a school bus for the district? Certainly in a lot of places. I think a lot of drivers, you just look at the sick outages that school districts everywhere have to plan for. Obviously folks need mental health days. They get sick and they need to stay home. But is your organization one of those where the folks wake up and they can't wait to get to school so they can get in on the school bus and see their kiddos? That's really what we strive for across this industry, and illustrated by the top teams, of course. So we'll hear from D'Allah a little bit later what Waterloo Central School District in New York, how they're moving the needle. But certainly found it interesting. And one of the things that I would like to know is what other states out there have similar data as Virginia does when they're tracking the ebb and flow of school bus driver vacancies. And interestingly enough, when I was going through the data there, this data is for the 2021-22 school year, 22-23, and then 23-24. Obviously, they don't have the numbers yet for the current school year. But basically, it's been an overall about 5% decrease in full-time jobs that are vacant. Now, it doesn't sound like a whole lot, but every little bit counts. So, when you're talking about chipping away at this thing, and that's really what the industry needs to do, is just continue to chip away at this employee shortage. And what can we do better as an industry to not only advertise the jobs, but advocate them? And advocate for the importance of driving the school bus, the importance of maintaining and repairing the school buses, the importance of routing them, the importance of training the drivers that drive them, and the monitors and aides that are there for support. It takes a village, as they say, and certainly this industry is a village, a very vital village in the larger education sector. So the more that we can get these positive stories out there of what is working, how are folks addressing challenges, the more that we're going to be able to reverse these trends that we've been seeing of driver shortages and staff shortages.
Ryan, what jumped out to me is the October issue cover, The Foundations of Team Success. When you really start to break it down, you look at that triangle, right? Gifts, talents, passions, learning and outlook, safety, success. Those are definitely all foundational things. And culture obviously builds towards that, like you said, right? It's this kind of development of your people and investing in them. We always talk about that, especially around driver shortage, right? It's always this discussion of wage, right? And there are things that are in your control and there are things that are not in your control. And sometimes the wage of the drivers is not in control. Right? You don't, as a transportation director, maybe have control of what you pay these people. It's dictated by unions, by school boards. There are certain hierarchies within school districts on how employees are classified. And that puts you in a really tough position. So it's like, how do you attract people to this role? And this is a constant thing that the industry has struggled with. And it's not just school bus, right? It's a lot of vocations. But when, say, you're a private fleet operator, like a contractor, you can pay more. It's more of a business decision at that point, right? So you can say, hey, I'm going to pay these drivers $40 an hour, $50 an hour, which that's high, right? Like that's a really big number. But you'll probably have a lot more drivers as a result. But you're going to have to charge more to your clients to get those people in those seats. And we see that too, right? The use of non-traditional yellow vehicles, cars, vans, things like that, third-party rideshare services or alternative student transportation. There's drivers in those seats, but as a result, you're paying more as a transportation department to get that done. Now, that's a way to maybe circumvent the driver shortage for you. And chances are these are not CDL drivers, but you're getting transportation, but you're paying a pretty penny for it. And again, maybe that growth that we've seen is a result of this. So how do we get around it? How do you circumvent the pay discussion? It's by using third parties to be able to supplement your routes and to get more drivers in seats. Now, some districts, as we've seen, they have mixed, right? The district may own 100 or 200 or 300 buses if you're large, and then they outsource another 500 to XYZ contractor. So these are all models we see, but I see this continuing to proliferate because of this challenge where there's really no end in sight. And culture is interesting to talk about, hard to do. You really got to lay the foundation over time. And for a new candidate or a new driver, it's really difficult to translate to them that you have a great culture. You can say it, but they have to experience it, right? They have to be in it and really feel like, wow, this is a family. This is a place I want to work, right? They're not in it for the money. They're in it for the kids, the student success, the team. And we see this as a constant cadence in the industry.
And the best sales people that school districts or school bus companies have are their employees. If they do truly have a good culture, because you're right, people can say you have a good culture, but you need to show it. You need to do. And the folks you have on staff already, they're going to be the best representatives for the organization. They're going to show immediately to the new applicant, is this really what the hiring manager is telling me is the case here? Is this really a good culture? They'll know right away before I would venture a guess they even start. If they start just visiting or start training and they don't become a full school bus driver yet, they'll know within the first couple days, if not maybe the first couple hours, if this is really the type of organization that they've been sold on. So you're right. It's you can say a lot of things, but you have to show action. And the top transportation teams that we honored in Reno over the summer at STN EXPO West, and folks like D'Allah Laffoon and others, they're the ones who are walking the walk. It's not just talk out there, and that's the one. It's like you said, it's not easy. It can be one of the most challenging things organizations do. We get so caught up in the day to day and the moving kids from A to B, or purchasing decisions, or alternative fuels, electric buses, but it comes down to, again, training your folks. It comes to providing that open collaboration, that communication that we talk about in this October issue, to really set those foundations so that culture really can thrive.
All right, going to head over an interview with Ryan Gray and D'Allah Laffoon. But before we get there, it's a quick message. Did you know that school buses fueled by propane can help you reduce emissions in your community while saving money? Propane school buses have a lower average carbon intensity than electric school buses over their lifetime by more than half. And they emit up to 96% less nitrogen oxide than diesel buses. All of this from fleets with the lowest total cost of ownership. It's no wonder propane is the most widely used alternative fuel in the school bus industry. Learn more at betterourbuses.com. That's betterourbuses.com.
All right, let's now welcome to the School Transportation Nation podcast stage, D'Allah Laffoon, the transportation supervisor for Waterloo Central School District in New York, one of the top transportation team winners, sponsored by TransFinder at our STN EXPO West in Reno over the summer. D'Allah, it's great seeing you again. Thanks for joining us.
No, not a problem. Good afternoon.
As I mentioned, Waterloo was one of 6 school districts recognized over the summer with that top team award. And I caught up with you, D'Allah, on the trade show floor. We chatted for a little bit, and you gave me a sound bite or two that we played earlier this year in one of our podcasts as we were recapping the STN Expo. So again, congratulations to you and your team. You were telling me what it meant to you to win this award. Can you share that again with our audience? What has it meant for Waterloo to get that recognition?
It was very, very important for us as a department. We have come a long way, and coming in after COVID, coming in after starting a couple different years, and really a lot of the changes we've gone through. We did a lot of changes in the past 5 years. So being able to, still have a foundation of having a good team with all those changes, it really was a good reflection on kind of how the team works. We initially started it. I spoke with my dispatcher and my secretary on, hey, what do you guys think about doing this? How do you think we'll land? And my goal at the time was just to get data and kind of say, hey, where do we need to work at? And if we got in the top, 20, I'd be happy with that kind of deal. And so then when the results came out and we were in the top, we were all ecstatic. The drivers and monitors were ecstatic. So it was a pretty big deal here in Waterloo for us.
Well, take me through that a little bit, because I was mentioning to you before we started recording some of the other districts I've spoken to over the last couple of years that have received these awards. It wasn't always all puppy dogs and roses and balloons and confetti. It was sometimes there was some growing pains, and then a lot of the cultural recognitions came through a lot of blood, sweat, and tears out of necessity. Tell me what it was like at Waterloo before, and kind of compare and contrast that to what it is now and how you guys got there.
Sure. So when I first started, I started about a week before February break in 2020, which was, I think I started on the break of 2020, February break. We ran 1 week of school, or 1.5 weeks of school, then we went right into the shutdown. So a lot of my first time interacting with drivers was explaining the shutdown, which at that point no one knew what that meant, and teach them how to clean a bus, how to wipe down a seat, some of these things. So it was a lot of tough times, because a lot of what my initial responsibilities were doing was kind of, some basic stuff that people didn't understand. And then it was go home, because, we don't know we're going to open back up kind of deal. So immediately off the bat, it was a tough time to establish any type of, relationship with my staff, because I'm sending them home, I'm sending them home. I'm telling them to be home, and then we immediately went into lunches. And the thing about lunches that we did, it was, it's way out of what the bus garage was used to doing. We're delivering lunches. There's really no routing process. The process that we took at that time was definitely out of my control. But we were able to trudge through it and see during that time what the goal of the team was. And that goal was pretty much students. I mean, they were pretty obvious that they wanted to help the students at that time. And you can see that. I think one of the things coming out of that time was lunches, was seeing the core of what, my staff believed, what they felt they were here for. And knowing that, it was easy to build a team around that.
Absolutely. That's good stuff. So tell me a little bit about your background, because as you said, you came in February of 2020, the shutdown happened. And so I want to know, where were you coming from? What was your background in transportation when you joined Waterloo?
Sure. Prior to that, I was working at a non-for-profit agency that assisted people with developmental disabilities. And so I was running the transportation department there. We had a fleet of about 40 buses. We also managed a fleet of about 100 or so cars. So a lot of it was, overseeing transportation as a whole and the fleet management part of it. So that was here in the local area of Waterloo. So we were actually in and around that time, around the area. So I knew a lot of the people and a lot of the community members at that point. So it was a pretty nice transition. Prior to that, I worked fleet management for Hertz and Enterprise Rent-A-Car. And then before that, I was in manufacturing at a glass factory.
Okay.
So a little bit of backgrounds, but typically, came back in the transportation with fleet management. School busing, I had substitute drove here at Waterloo probably about maybe 7 years before I started as supervisor. And that's how I got my license through here.
What's been the biggest difference for you coming from these other, somewhat related organizations or industries coming into school bus or school transportation? Obviously the people, you touched on that with the culture, but I'm just kind of curious as the leader of the department, and you have these other experiences, and then coming into transportation where the cargo is the most precious. Again, it's the children. And considering your background and with, working with people with disabilities and working with fleet and maintenance, can you share with us how that experience is new, different?
Yeah. So one of the biggest things coming, primarily from either a corporate world or a non-for-profit world is you're actually have a lot more, I found here anyway, there's a lot more policy and procedures that I thought would have been a little bit different in the school busing world. There's a lot in the school busing world, but that all really revolves around just the busing aspect. There isn't a lot more outside of that, when you come to certain aspects of, whether it's HR or anything like that. A lot of it's kind of been done for so many years, but it hasn't really been written down, kind of a thing. So that was something that I thought was very different when I first came over here. We use a lot of paper, a lot of paper here in the district. That's changing, but that was another thing that I found that was a big difference. When it comes to budgeting, you're looking at a completely different aspect. Where when I worked for the non-for-profit, there was a lot more grants, and you were working within those grants with those vehicles. So a vehicle might be a specific grant funded, and it had to be used for a specific type of thing and not another thing. With school buses, obviously you're picking up students, so it's very simple. You're doing field trips, you're doing home to school, et cetera. But there isn't as much reporting when it comes to that as far as it was with the federal grants, because you're constantly applying for those. Whereas, this is pretty much, everyone knows we're a school district. They know that we're going to be transporting kids to school. You don't have to prove that every year, kind of a thing. So that's something that was different. The other thing was just sharing of knowledge. So we now we work very well with a lot of districts around us. When I first started, there was a little bit of a different group of areas supervisors, and trying to get some of the knowledge from them was a little bit harder. But now it's pretty fluent. We can get that from us because there's, a lot of things that come up that may not have come up in the last 5 years, but someone who's been here before has done it, and you can get that information from them. Our supervisors group in the area is very great. We do a really good job of supporting each other. And if someone has a question, you're going to get 16 answers, and they'll be roughly the same, but they're all ready to help and ready to do that. So that's something that's been very, very nice. Coming over to the school bus world here in New York is having that collaboration between all the supervisors, and that's across the state. So that's something that's been really, really nice. You don't really feel like you're on an island as much as when you know that the district next to you or the one way down Long Island dealing with the same thing, and they have ideas for you to work with. So that's been really good.
Okay. And with Waterloo, so for our listeners to illustrate where you are there in Waterloo, you're about halfway between Rochester and Syracuse, kind of upstate New York. Yeah. So I know that there are some very strong school districts and transportation groups up there, as you were alluding to, with like the supervisors. Tell our audience, what does your district makeup look like? Is it mostly rural, kind of a mix of suburban, rural? Is it hilly? Because I have a question that, based upon how you answer this, I think you know what I'm going to ask you about electric school buses. But first, take us through your operations, your demographics, your geography.
Yeah, so we're located in Seneca County. We're one of 4 districts in Seneca County. We're one of the largest ones, both size-wise and population-wise. We're about 84 square miles. We, shockingly enough, are not that hilly in comparison to even districts near us. We're pretty flat-planed. We're just each side of the thruway, and we go pretty much far south, along Seneca Lake, and it's fairly flat. So we don't have too many hills. We have a village, which is kind of one of our main demographics here. And then once you get outside the village, you're in a rural area. We do butt up next to Geneva City School District. And that area over there is a little bit more suburban, closer to that town over there. But for the most part, a lot of where we're traveling mileage-wise is going to be on those rural roads. Where we get a radio call that, hey, the cow's in the roads, call Mr. Johnson to come get them, kind of deal. So we have a lot of that going on too.
Okay, excellent. So with electric school buses, obviously that's one of the things at the forefront of New York student transporters' minds currently. We're looking at 2027 to be the date when all new buses that are purchased need to be zero emissions vis-a-vis electric. 2035, the entire fleet has to be electric. How many buses do you currently have in your fleet? And how many do you have any electrics yet?
So we currently are at 0 electric vehicles. We have about 33 buses in our fleet. That includes Suburbans and small buses. So right now we are at 0 electric vehicles for our fleet.
Okay. And I know that we've had some sessions on this, talking about kind of the pathway going forward, and we've had New York school districts discuss. There's been a lot of political wrangling going on. I think there's been some hopes that maybe the law would be repealed or at least extended. Haven't seen anything come to fruition yet. Some of the attempts have not been successful. I still gauge some hope out there from folks that something's going to happen to move the needle. But how is Waterloo operating right now? Because there's decisions you need to make today that's going to affect you for the next 10, 12 years. And knowing you have this electric mandate out here coming up very quickly now, just over 2 years away, basically. What's your plan?
So currently right now, Waterloo, we're doing a capital project this summer that's going to update our infrastructure here as far as being able to have the conduit and have a lot of the electricity, ran to the garage. We have had a study done earlier, I think it was end of last year, by ClearSalt, who has ensured us that we have enough power here in our area. We are very close to Seneca Meadows, which is a very large, waste location. And because of that, we have enough power here locally to, supposedly supply all of our buses. We're currently working on getting a second study just to verify that with a different company. A lot of what, so for me, I'm not an electrician by any means. So learning all this stuff is new. When, we worked with the power company to get some of these studies done, I said, let's get another idea. And we talked about our collaborative before. Our collaborative, a bunch of other groups are working with this other third party to have studies done to see, do we have enough electricity to do what we need to do? And that's going to be a little bit more in depth, look more at the routes, look more at, can we charge when the bus comes back? Is it going to be able to go back out? There's a lot of what ifs in the situation, to go full fleet. And then, a lot of questions of, okay, so you're a 33 bus operation now, but now that bus that you return, after your PM run, you can't go out on the field trips. You have to have another bus to sit there to be charged to go back out. So you need a larger fleet now than what you were used to having, or can you charge that bus in that time? So there's a lot of questions that are still unanswered, or you've got somewhat of an answer. Do you have proof behind it? So that's kind of where we're at now with the infrastructure being laid out. That's, the idea would be once we get the chargers, things like that, we should be able to plug and play. That sounds a lot easier than I'm sure it's going to be, but that's kind of the situation there. Each district is in its own little world when it comes to that. We have a neighboring district who already has 2 buses. And from what I understand, they think they can only support those 2 right now with their current grid. Whereas, again, like we've been said, we were supposedly able to go forward. The other thing is in New York, depending on how the makeup of your school is, your community may be the ones that vote on your buses. So, for example, here in Waterloo, before I can't just go out and buy a bus if I need it. I've got to put it out to vote. And the voters are the ones that will approve those purchases, things like that, and approve that amount. So if I, put out, for bid that I want to bid out for electric buses and the community is not, supportive of that, then I may not get buses that year, whether electric or gas, because I have to put out one or the other theoretically, or you could try to put out both. Some districts have ran into that here locally where they've put out, different bids and different things like that, or different votes. And, the community was not supportive of that. And then now they're going back to try to figure out how to, gain some fleet. So there's a lot of variables as to what the next steps are. And so on. We've also had a lot of administrative change here in the district. So that also plays into that as far as where the next steps are with our electrification.
Gotcha. And your current fleet, is it diesel? You mentioned gasoline. What's your current fuel mix right now?
So currently, our larger buses are all diesel, and then our smaller buses are gasoline. So we have a handful of small buses and Suburbans, and those are all gasoline.
Gotcha. So you mentioned, previously you have that fleet maintenance background, correct?
Yes.
So I want to get your thoughts on that because certainly, some of the intricacies of working on these vehicles. I'm curious what your mechanics think and kind of from your planning from that standpoint. I know you don't have any of the buses yet, so you probably haven't obviously taken any of the training that's being offered by the OEMs, but I just want to get your thoughts on the maintenance side of switching to a completely different platform.
Sure. So I think the biggest thing is, the electric buses are supposed to be a lot less maintenance. There's still going to be a lot of maintenance on the bus end. I mean, there's a lot that goes on the bus end. I think right now, currently, we've had, for the past 3 years, we've gotten a pretty good amount of new buses. And a lot of what we're maintaining on those buses is the emissions. So, it's the DEF or it's the particulate, things that are just coming up that, it's a sensor that needs to be replaced and so on and so forth. So the idea for me is, if we don't have those situations, we might be okay, going forward. The biggest thing when it comes to fleet maintenance with electrification is probably just going to be the unknown. There's a lot that the mechanics are not supposed to work on as far as the high voltage stuff, those kind of things. And hopefully those are the things that we're not going to run into in those first couple of years. But, we're still in a lot of, depending on the manufacturers, a lot of them are changing a little bit of what comes on those buses. So from what I understand, like disc brakes will be standard, those kind of things that will be a little bit different. I mean, I think my mechanics will be excited for disc brakes because they're a little bit easier to work with. No brake pulls, things like that. So they have their concerns and they have their questions. We've actually had electric bus here as a demo that was brought in by a vendor, and then, it was underneath and it was very, you're looking underneath it. It's very clean. It's very laid out pretty good. And there's a lot of things that just are a little bit different and things to maintain that are a little bit different. I think the best part about, this new process, if we, get electrification, is that we'll probably be able to spend a little bit more time on working out on some of the accessories that we get on our buses, our camera system, things like that. With also being mindful of each time you have an accessory on a bus, now you're worried more about that power and is that going to affect your range? So we here in Waterloo, we have 8 camera system, and the buses will relay or Wi-Fi connect at the end of the routes up to 4 hours. So I was very much told that you're going to have to cut that down because you're going to be obviously eating your battery life, et cetera. So those are the kind of things you have to look at and kind of see.
Gotcha.
Great thoughts, guys. Let's take a quick break. Hey guys, what do software, hardware, and safety have in common? One word: TransFinder. At the STN EXPO in Reno, TransFinder won 3 Innovation Choice Awards voted on by STN EXPO attendees for best software, best hardware, best safety technology. TransFinder's Route Finder plus routing solution and apps, Stop Finder and Wayfinder, are well known in the industry. Not everyone realizes TransFinder provides hardware like card readers, tablets, and mounts. And as for safety, Patrol Finder for schools is TransFinder's latest solution designed to make buses and campuses safer. TransFinder's president and CEO, Antonio Civitella, said the recognition means so much because it's voted on by STN EXPO attendees. Civitella said, "We know a lot is riding on TransFinder because a lot is riding on those yellow buses that travel through our communities. TransFinder must continue to innovate as more is being expected of transportation departments from district leadership as well as parents." Learn more at transfinder.com. That's transfinder.com.
Now, here we are. You're about 3-4 weeks into your new school year. So most of the New York school districts go back to school after Labor Day. So as this is coming out, it's about a month or so after you started. Being the top team that you are, have to also ask how school startup went. It seems like over the last 2 school years, in certain places, I've heard that it's the most challenging it's ever been. Other places, not so much. Where does Waterloo fall with school startup?
So I will say, so we started up on the Thursday after Labor Day. And for our district, we have every Friday in our district is early release Friday. So we started on Thursday, we had early release Friday on Friday, then we had school on Monday. We had 3 first days. The way I see it, as crazy as it sounds, we had 3 first days. Our morning routes went very well. We did really good. Our afternoon routes did really good. We do get a little bit, time lagged at our elementary schools, make sure the kids are on the right bus. Our Monday was probably the most concerning day that, just getting the kids in the right buses and so on and so forth. And I think that was kind of like our real first day because we have a lot of parents that were transporting on Thursday and Friday, and now those kids are back on Monday. But between those 3 days, we really had almost 3 first days. I think the team did really well. We did very well. All students were accounted for. All students got home. Yep, we were delayed in the afternoon, of course. Just of course getting a lot of those kids to where they need to be and on the right buses. So that definitely wasn't. That was planned for. We kind of knew that was going to happen. But once we, got going there by that Wednesday, we were pretty much right on schedule. We're still, working on getting some of the elementary schools a little bit faster, but we're pretty much where we need to be.
Okay. And how many students transported?
About 1,100 students.
Okay. In terms of getting those kids to and from, one of the things that we've seen a big trend over the last, many years is bell times. So you don't have a huge operation there, but certainly everything's relative, right? So I'm curious what that looks like from a routing standpoint. You said that for the most part, everything was on time. What's your secret sauce?
So, one thing we do a lot, and this is something that we've started, we work a lot with our neighboring districts. So we have shared routes with our district to the west or districts to the east, one to the south, and we do a lot of transfers. So we're doing a lot with less, so we've actually, our routes have been down. So for me, hitting those times so that we're meeting these buses and, having a singular, routing is very important. So we have transfer buses that happen before and after certain schools. And if those buses are late, the whole district can be late, right? So a lot of the concern of those 3 days was that transfer bus was getting late, was getting held up and those kind of things. So, a lot of the times it's me going to the school and saying, hey, what's going on? Let's get these kids. Let's get them going. Here's what's happening. Painting that picture. It only takes one domino for all of them to fall. And trying to paint that picture with the schools and the admin to say, here's what's happening because of this. It's very important. And usually when that picture is painted properly and seen, you can start seeing the difference in how people are reacting to that. So one of the things is for us is getting to know that how things mess. Of course, the day before school, we get thrown all kind of different crazy things that happen. We got to start doing this. this person's got to get picked up here. Here's, 5 new McKinney-Vento students. And a lot of that is what gets thrown in the day before. Working with our neighboring districts has been great. We actually had a school that started up 2 weeks before school started, now district school, that I'd heard talkings about, but nothing official. We didn't get the official letter probably until I was about 2 weeks before school started. And surprise, and so when you call the parent saying, hey, this is what's happening, and they haven't gotten their letter yet, that's something that throws a wrench into things. And honestly, that we had another district helping us out, and it didn't work out for that district, so we had to speak with another district. So it worked out very well, and we would be at loss without our neighboring districts, and vice versa, I'm sure, for them. So that all coming together and setting up these, I always say, there's toothpicks holding the castle wall, setting everything up together and making sure that's going. That's what's very important to make. That's the secret sauce for us, and making sure everyone knows about it. I mean, we've got 2 buses that transfer here at our bus garage for 2 different districts, and it's amazing to see all this stuff work. And, but when one thing doesn't work out right, or you get one delay, everything else goes downhill. So
communication, collaboration, problem solving.
Yes.
Lastly, I have to ask, one of the other big topics that continues throughout the industry, the driver shortage. So again, being your top team, spoken with a lot of the other top teams, and that culture always seems to resonate in terms of staffing. How is Waterloo doing with the new school year? Certainly, you can start the school year with a set number of drivers, and that can change the snap of a finger. How are you guys doing right now? How do you foresee, if you the best you can, how the driver staffing and just the overall staffing in your department will go for the rest of the school year?
Sure. Well, I always say I need drivers, even if I had 100 of them. So currently, we don't have any open routes. Our routes are all full, which is a blessing. I always joke. I said, once I get a driver in, I can keep them. That's not a problem. It's recruiting them and getting a driver to come in. We are near a handful of districts at varying different pay rates. So it all depends on what that person needs to come on over to Waterloo and vice versa. And we're getting them trained. The training process here in New York has become very, very rigorous over the past few years. So even a person who has a CDL, has a Class A, to come in and get a bus license, they might think they can walk into that test, but it's a lot different than it used to be. So one of the things that works out really good for us here, again, like I said, is we're fully staffed. We have a handful of sub drivers. We actually just have our first permanent sub this year. That's been working out great. They've been covering a driver who's been out on medical, and that's been a really good transition for us. Biggest thing for us is we just need more sub drivers to help with some of the sports trips that leave a little bit earlier in the afternoon, some of the time off requests. My mechanics have been doing a really great job of filling in driving, dispatching. Myself have been doing a good job driving. So we've all been kind of working on that. But if there was anything I can do more, it'd be getting more sub drivers. Monitor wise, I could take more monitors all day. We've done a lot in the past 4 or 5 years of getting monitors on routes, assisting drivers. We had a conversation in Albany last weekend about, how does monitors affect driver retention? If you're able to have a monitor on the bus, is that, are you going to be able to get more drivers? Will they stay longer? That alleviates some of the concern of driving the bus. And sometimes it does. I mean, when you pull up to a stop and, the mother asks you what happened yesterday afternoon, and you're just trying to figure out the route because you're not row 25 of the bus, it's tough. But if there's monitors there, say, yep, I was there, this is what I saw, this was written up, that takes a little bit of pressure off as a driver. So staffing wise here, I think we're going to be okay. I could take subs all day, and monitors, I could take those too, and I'd be happy.
Excellent. Well, congratulations again, D'Allah, to you and the entire team, the entire district, the entire community there in Waterloo. Something to really be proud of with that top team award. And we'll be paying attention and watching you guys and looking for more great things coming from you. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Not a problem. Thank you very much.
All right, another great episode, Ryan. Thanks so much for jumping on, sharing some knowledge with us. Thanks to D'Allah Laffoon as well for being here. Appreciate his comments. Our podcast sponsor, TransFinder, for being on. And special thanks to our other sponsors, IC Bus and Propane. Couldn't do it without you guys. Make sure and thank them. Send them a note, drop them an email, let them know you heard about them on the STN podcast, because we're here every week. Episode 230. We've been here a couple episodes, so we're glad you guys have been with us. We appreciate you, our listeners. You can always go to stnonline.com to check out the latest information. We got that TSD conference coming up down in Dallas, Frisco, Texas, November 7th through the 12th. Great place to get the ultimate in special needs training for you and your staff. Make sure and sign up today. Also, we've got STN EXPO East. Registration is opening soon. If you haven't seen it, go over to the website. That's going to be March 20th through the 25th, 2025. That feels far away, but definitely start planning now what you're going to be doing out there. We'd love to see you in Charlotte, North Carolina at that time. So we're looking forward to that conference. Lots happening. And guys, don't forget, check out that new October issue. Lots in there, chock full of content, leadership, stories, great columns. Ryan and I have got a couple great columns in there. One about training. Definitely want to talk about the new cell phone bans, what it means out there for you in the industry. So we'd love for you guys to keep listening every week. You can go to anywhere you listen to pods, Apple, Spotify, go to stnpodcast.com, share it with all your friends on socials. Nation, we love you. We'll see you next week.